Hey, glad you're there. In this video, we're talking about Genesis and the power of true assumptions, the revised edition, which was just published about a week ago, and we're really excited that you're here, excited to show you a little bit about what this new volume is about and some of the changes. And so in just a moment, we're going to check that out right on Amazon. And so I'm just, happy that this volume is out there. As some of you might know, my father had asked me to finish this book. He had published it previously, but he had made some changes and some editing, and he wasn't done yet. So I followed up and finished up that project. But at the same time, I really found myself wrestling with a lot of the ideas that are found in the book. And I really found my own way of seeing the value of what my father was doing. And in the process as well, because the book is so big and my father often talked in not quite philosophical categories, but he had a language and a coherent system of thinking. And sometimes the level was pretty high, pretty complex. But in the process, I really wanted to make the book more accessible. It is a big volume, but at the same time, I thought, hey, there's a way that can make it more accessible. And so one of the things I did is I added a glossary of key terms. So a number of terms that were used throughout the book, some academic, some just probably not familiar to many readers, and then some were terms my father developed himself. I brought all those terms together at the back of the book so that while reading, the reader can go and get the definition of that term and then go back to reading and so forth. So there's many changes. So let's take a moment and go to Amazon ourselves. Let's open up the right web page browser. Here we go. So here is even a sample from the back cover of the book. And I have this quote here, which is very true. I'm persuaded that the content in this book is needed more than ever, as it speaks incisively to our current cultural brokenness and gives us a hopeful orientation that also brings healing, I think. And one of the things that Genesis and the Power of True Assumptions does is it takes us back to the created order and God's design, God's intent, God's heart for creation, for humanity, and where it's all going. And the seedlings of that is all found in the first two chapters of Genesis, as well as then the brokenness that comes in chapter 3. And we see the trajectory of how God's going to heal and how he's going to step in and get involved. But this book is also a book that deals with worldview, or we could say it deals at the worldview level. So many people, all of us, come from different angles, but some of us have different worldviews, different perspectives on God, on nature, what is man, things like this. And it's not just those issues are informed from a worldview or a prior foundation. And if we never talk at that level, we're always going to be talking past each other and thinking it's an issue. It's an issue versus an issue. Now, sometimes it is that, but the much deeper level is it's a worldview. And so this book really gets the foundations and makes the claim that all good foundations really stem from Genesis. And all the assumptions for reality stem from Genesis, and the best assumptions found outside of a biblical worldview were first found here. Now, that's a big claim, but that's where this book is going. So here you can see the back of the book, and I'm going to scroll up to the top. So here we go. Here's the cover. And so right away, you're going to see table of contents. Now, the prior book had a table of contents, of course, but it was very minimalistic. It only had the chapter titles. As well, in the book itself, there were no chapter headings or section headings. So in some ways, with a massive volume, you'd open up, or say you're reading it and you're on page 350, And then you'd be like, oh yeah, where am I in the book? It was hard to have orientation. And maybe if you put it down and wanted to get back and find a section you were just reading, you didn't know where to look, perhaps, unless you were good at remembering that or marking that for yourself. But so one of the things I wanted to do is make it very navigable, make it easy for the reader. And so I made a very comprehensive table of contents. And you can see here you have the chapter headings, titles, and then the subheadings, so that it's easy to find any section that you want to find in the book. And so I find this will be very helpful, not only if there's a particular theme that you're looking for, or you read something and you said, oh yeah, I want to come back to that, then will be a very easy way to do that. And you can see here, part 1, good assumptions. I can just mention that the book has 3 main sections. Part 1, which is good assumptions. So those are the 12 assumptions that are found in Genesis 1 and 2, as well as then the reality of forgiveness, the reality of loving enemies, which flows out of God's response to our sin, brokenness, and evil in Genesis 3. And so that's all in section 1, and that's really the foundation. And there's 12 assumptions, like I said, and you can get a glimpse of that here with the many subheadings. And you see that it's covering quite a lot of territory. Just as we're looking, there we go. A profile of male anger in the Bible. The thunder of Yahweh's judgment. What do you think? Have you ever heard about God coming in the cool breeze in Genesis 8 after man and woman sinned? What if the translation is different? What if he came in a thunderous storm cloud? That is what you might read about in that section. Many other subsections that are very interesting, covering these different assumptions. And so over 300 pages is the first section of the book. We come to part 2, which is conflict on the earth. And so part 1 deals with God's order. Part 2 deals with the conflict over God's order, over God's way of doing things, and that expresses itself in some of the conflicts we see today. Different worldview claims, different claims. So you have claims about evolution. What is man? What is the nature of creation? Is there a God? You have other claims about what is human life, and is a fetus in a mother's womb, is that a human life? You have the question of sexuality and so forth. It gets into the issues where we have conflict over reality, how to do society together. And the argument is that we need to get to know God's good design to be able to address these very difficult issues, because the goal isn't just to try to say other viewpoints are wrong. The goal is to bring God's original design of wholeness into the brokenness, to give people a sight and a way out of the brokenness, and say, okay, that's a better way. And that's what then restoration is all about. And so we can't have restoration unless we know what the design was to begin with. And then as we come to part 3, that's conflict in the heavenlies. And this is spiritual warfare. And this is a wonderful section. It's a large section as well. And it's part of the Bible that isn't talked about as much, perhaps, in regular Bible discourse, but it's a commanding theme throughout the scriptures, and that is the invisible reality of evil and of the demonic powers that try to stop what God is doing, and particularly with a malice against human beings and those who would serve God. And so from the Old Testament perspective, the main work of the enemy is to stop God's plan of rescue, which is the promised Messiah that would come from the seed of the woman, and to get God's people to trip up and worship gods and worship other things besides the true living God. And we have this all traced throughout Scripture, and we have the Old Testament and the New Testament Very well done. And then as well as many stories of spiritual warfare in the ministry. And then finally, we come to the end of the book. And this is part of the sample in the beginning, but we'll skip down a little bit. And we get down to the key term and concepts that I mentioned in the beginning. And here you have the ability to go to these terms. These terms are highlighted in the body of the text. So biblical ethics. Okay, what are biblical ethics about? We can go here. There's also cross-referencing. Okay, see also 6 pillars of biblical power. Biblical literacy, Bible on its own terms. Bitterness. We know what bitterness is perhaps, but what about theological bitterness according to the Bible? And so forth. And so there's, 60, 70 pages worth of terms here for your studying. And to also make it helpful, at the very end, there is an index of these terms so that you are able to do a thorough study of any one term or theme. It's taking me a while to get through all the terms. I think Amazon is generous in revealing the whole glossary. So if you want to see what the book's about, you can go there. This is on the desktop version, by the way. I couldn't find a sample on the phone version. Maybe if you have the app, maybe it could be found there. There will be an ebook coming. Just trying to work on finding the best person or consultant to do that, because I would like to have terms being able to be clickable and cross-referenced. I don't know if it's possible in a practical manner, but I'm looking into that. But either way, a digital version will be coming and probably be more affordable. And if you really like to have something that doesn't weigh a couple pounds sitting around in your house or in your hand, then that might be an option for you. And so we're getting here finally to the index. Here we go. So you can look up every term that you would like and do a study on your own. And then finally, there is a scripture index. So we have every scripture that's used in the book or reference. We have it all listed here. So you can do some very interesting Bible studies. And yeah, that's my hope. I truly believe the material is needed to equip the church. How do we engage with those who disagree with us? How do we engage different worldviews? To give us confidence in the historicity, the reliability of the scriptural text, and that there is a real spiritual war going on. Jesus has won that war, and he's equipped us to go out and love people and spread truth and mercy and love in his name. And I hope that this book will serve that, and the added resources within it will just help equip you and equip others in spreading the good news of God, which is inviting. It's not forceful. It's truly loving your neighbor. And that's what this book is about. So enjoy, and God bless.